correspondent John Sparks. And John, I just want to read you a couple of responses that we've had. This is from the advisor to Iran's supreme leader, in which he says, "We congratulate the Palestinian fighters. We will stand by the Palestinian fighters until the liberation of Palestine and Jerusalem." Meanwhile, a statement from Egypt, which has warned of grave consequences from an escalation in the tensions between Israel and the Palestinians. It's called for exercising maximum restraint and avoiding exposing civilians to further danger. It's a reminder, really, of how multi-layered this is, and potentially how serious the international geopolitical ramifications could be.
Absolutely. I mean, I think those statements are an excellent example of just how complicated this is, how this conflict exists on multiple levels. The Israelis accuse the Iranians of sponsoring and supporting Hamas, of supplying them with weapons and financing. It is Hamas principally and another group called Islamic Jihad who have launched these attacks on Israel this morning. And then you hear from Egypt, you hear from Turkey, from Erdogan this morning, earlier, taking a more moderate position in the middle. And then we've got the leaders of the UK and France coming out strongly.
Saying Israel has a right to defend herself.
Absolutely. Also a statement from Hezbollah. This is a militant group, but very much like Hamas, both a militant group and a governing organization in Lebanon as well. And they have a close relationship with Hamas. They say this attack is a decisive response to Israel's continued occupation and a message to those seeking normalization with Israel. And that is an interesting statement. Decisive response to Israel's continued occupation? Well, this is not a proportionate fight between the Hamas and the Israeli military. The Israeli military is very powerful. It's technologically advanced. They've just called up 10,000 soldiers. Hamas doesn't field a military wing, anything like that. It's not proportionate. We can expect this action, this military action launched by Hamas. I think we can reasonably expect it to be crushed in the coming days by the Israelis. But interesting that the Hezbollah goes on to say that it's a message to those seeking normalization with Israel, because at the moment Israel is talking with Saudi Arabia. The Gulf states. The US are brokering talks between Israel and Saudi Arabia that could see the Saudis recognizing Israel. And that's something that the Saudis have always refused to do until you get a just resolution in the Saudi view to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So there's a lot going on, and Hamas may be motivated in part by these talks with Saudi Arabia. They don't want this issue, the cause in their eyes of the Palestinian people, to be forgotten, to be dropped by countries who they see as their natural allies, like the Saudis. So there's a lot going on. It's this conflict waged at the national level, and it's being waged on the ground right now in southern Israel.
Yeah, of course. Had an interesting perspective on some of the geopolitical ramifications from all of this when I spoke earlier with the foreign editor of the Jewish News, Yotam Confini, who told me about the current situation in Tel Aviv as well.
It is absolutely empty on the streets. Most people are hiding inside, not leaving their house. A few cars drive around here and there, but mainly people are trying to understand what exactly is going on, because we've heard very little information from authorities. All we heard from the defense minister and from the prime minister is that Israel is at war now, but we have several situations unfolding near the Gaza border that simply haven't been confirmed, such as hostage situations in several kibbutzim near the Gaza border, people being shot and killed inside their houses. But the army is only saying that they are flooding the south with reserve forces, but they aren't confirming anything about hostage situations. So people are mainly inside now, watching the television to find out what's going on. This is an absolutely unprecedented situation in Israel, with 6 hours of rocket firing and terrorist infiltration without authorities really confirming this information flow that's also being flooded on social media.
May I just clarify, where are you speaking to us from?
I'm speaking to you from Tel Aviv, which is normally a very bubbly place, especially on Saturday mornings. People go to cafes and have a good time. It is empty. You see, like I said, a few cars here and there, but I am in Tel Aviv. It's Yafo, technically. It's a small suburb right next to Tel Aviv, but I am in Tel Aviv, and I heard several explosions throughout the day. Israel's missile defense system shooting down rockets, and I also had to run for shelter earlier when I was doing a live interview. So a completely chaotic situation, and I have never seen the Israeli authorities being attacked by so many people, both from the opposition, but also from experts, because of this surprise attack. The fact that so many people from the Gaza Strip managed to infiltrate by sea, land, and ground without Israel knowing is simply, like I said, unprecedented.
Yeah, 5,000 rockets, being able to get through the heavily fortified fence area as well. This does certainly look like it has been well planned. Surprised that it seems to have been taken the security services by surprise as well.
Absolutely, and ironically, this attack comes exactly 50 years after Israel was also suffering a huge surprise attack in the Yom Kippur War in 1973, where Egypt and Syria launched surprise attacks. And throughout this year, because of the 50th anniversary, the Israelis had talked about whether this could happen again. Obviously, this is different. Hamas and Islamic Jihad are not armies like the Syrian army and the Egyptian army were, but they are strong. And what we see them doing now is terrorizing an entire area of Israel, with the Israeli military apparently not being able to get this situation under control, with terrorists running wild in villages and shooting people indiscriminately. We even hear some reports about hostages being taken into Gaza. Again, this is not something we can confirm. We haven't heard from the authorities, but we heard someone saying that her father had been dragged into Gaza. This is a highly, highly volatile situation. If Israeli civilians are all of a sudden finding themselves as hostages inside Gaza Strip, this would be a catastrophe for Israel.
Well, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has warned Hamas of a response like they've never seen before. What do you think that will look like?
I rarely speculate, but I would say in this situation, I do think that we will see some sort of a ground invasion with troops on the ground, especially if there are hostages inside the Gaza Strip. Now, Israel cannot allow that to happen. So I do suspect that we will see a ground invasion. Again, this is something that they will discuss in about 20 minutes when the security cabinet is convening. And many of the militant members of the cabinet will most likely advocate for a complete takeover of Gaza. They have said that before, that Israel should just simply take Gaza back. Whether they're going to do that, we still don't know. But I would say we haven't been as close to a ground invasion of Gaza as we are now since 2014, when Israel launched the war against Hamas in Gaza.
Well, the Israeli commentator Danny Seideman spoke to my colleague Anna Jones a little earlier.
Israel is in a deep state of shock, collectively, and many of us, far too many of us, personally. This is a total surprise. Operationally, it's a total surprise in terms of intelligence. There have been warnings in recent weeks that the situation is very tense, but they were not focused and they were not heeded. This is highly recalls the events of 50 years ago yesterday, the surprise in the Yom Kippur War. We have been listening to the radio broadcasts from the coasts along the Suez Canal begging for help. This morning on Israeli television and Israeli radio, we have been hearing pleas live from people inside their shelter rooms saying the terrorists outside, the army is not here. This is an earthquake in Israel. It's a country in a deep state of shock. We don't know the full picture. but it is clear that Israel will not be the same country when the smoke clears. Final word. When my defense minister says Israel will win this war, I respectfully disagree with him. This war will have no winners. One message is absolutely clear. If life in Gaza will be hell, Israel will not be paradise. Enough said.
And if we can hold on to you for a moment more, I would like to get your thoughts on how you think Israel militarily will respond.
I fear that the major goal of this is going to be massive retaliation against Gaza, non-routine. And you're hearing that even from moderate and left of center people within the security establishment. Some of this will be to impose punishing consequences on the Hamas. When you impose punishing consequences on the Hamas, you're going to have large numbers of civilian casualties. There will be an element of this, and I hate to say it, which will be to satisfy the lust of revenge that clearly will be evident in Israeli society. It's a natural human response. And we have a government that is in deep crisis and a prime minister who is not viewed by many of Israeli citizens as legitimate, credible. We are now 4.5 hours into this earth-shaking event, and the prime minister has held his silence. I think that there may be an attempt to satisfy some of these urges by a massive attack, but a massive attack is in the cards. I do agree with Ami that we have to be very alert as to potential other developments. There have been skirmishes near my home in Jerusalem and so on. We share a city, 40% of the population are Palestinians, and they are looking at things differently. And the situation in the West Bank is extremely tense, and of course, Hezbollah. So, in the book of Amos, it says, Hamaskim ba'et yidom. In these times, the prudent should hold their silence because the times are evil.
And Danny, one more question to you. You say that the Prime Minister has been silent. What are Israeli citizens being told today? It must be a frightening situation for people in many of these cities affected.
We're not being told anything. You have had the statement by Garat, which also came quite late. There have been a couple of not senior IDF officials speaking on television. Israel has very good analysis, but the leadership of Israel has been conspicuous by its almost total absence. We are a leaderless country at the moment.
Just to bring you a travel advisory update from the Foreign Office, which is advising against all travel to the Gaza area, some of the areas near the border with Lebanon as well. For more specific information, please do consult the FCDO's website for more information on that. Meanwhile, you are watching Sky News. More on this moving, developing story after the break, after Hamas has launched an attack on Israel with its fighters crossing the border into the south of the country. 22 Israelis have died, more than 500 have been injured. There's estimates likely to rise. We'll be hearing from a Middle East expert after the break. It was everything that a journalist might want in a story.
You don't want to lecture people, but you do have to give them the facts. Do we have the fairest path to reach net zero by 2050?
And done nothing with that story. Not at all. Our app gives you the very best of Sky News.
It's okay, he's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
Truly staggering. I wasn't prepared for all the sights.
What's your response to what Alex is saying? It's a controversial issue.
That's what we're facing at the moment.
Are we ready to do some marches?
Their longest ever joint strike. We have just been going through pay negotiations
This is hardcore emergency medicine in the hardest of circumstances.
And listen, it's quite a time, hasn't it?
You have to see these things, but it fucking hurts when you do it.
I'm ready. Are you?
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C. Well, the plan seems to be to head to the police station where the policeman who fired the shots was based.
And everything you know, his memories is all gone.
In almost every corner, this town has been completely destroyed by the fire. I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too.
We have to get Trump out of the White House.
Is this the moment to reform gun laws?
You know, it's easy to go to politics.
It's important. It's at the heart of the issue.
I get that that's where the media likes to go.
It's not. It's where many of the people we've talked to here like to go.
I report on the biggest stories from around the world. This is a town that is effectively encircled by the Russians. You say it's all fabrication, what's happening in Butcher?
Destroyed my nation.
We take you to the heart of stories that shape our planet. Oh, I'm fun! I can hear now quite a few explosions in the distance here in Jerusalem. Very violent series of confrontations here. What do you think of ISIS?
Everybody here knows the truth of ISIS.
Welcome back. We are following very closely the developing situation in Israel. You would expect we are getting a lot of foreign reaction to that from world leaders. The Saudi Foreign Ministry has said we call for an immediate cessation of violence between Israeli and the Palestinians. Meanwhile, the Iran-backed Lebanese group Hezbollah, an arch foe, of course, of Israel, has issued a statement saying it was closely following the situation in Gaza, is in direct contact with the leadership of the Palestinian resistance. The statement goes on to add that it was a decisive response to Israel's continued occupation and a message to those who are seeking normalization with Israel. Well, earlier, speaking on Sky News, Avi Melamed, he's a Middle East expert and founder of Inside the Middle East. He's currently in Tel Aviv, expressed his surprise at this escalation.
First, definitely, it was a totally surprise, and obviously there are many questions that has to be asked from the Israeli side. I would like to put this whole attack, this whole war in a wider context in a couple of perspectives. One, the big question is, are we witnessing an opening phase in a multi-phase or a multi-front war that is supposed to be waged on Israel? And in that context, obviously, the eyes should be turned also on Lebanon and to watch Hezbollah. Obviously, this is a military move that was planned and orchestrated for a long period of time. It didn't happen overnight. So we have to look closely at that aspect. The other issue, which I think is very significant, is to look at the story of this war in the context of the region and the context of the inner Palestinian power struggle. The Palestinians are split. Hamas is fighting the Fatah over seniority of the Palestinian people. In the last couple of weeks, we heard more and more frequently about a possible Israeli-Saudi peace agreement or normalization. From a Palestinian side, and I'm reflecting now what the Palestinians are saying, that seems like a case where the Palestinian case is totally thrown under the bus by the Arab world. It seems as if Hamas made a strategic decision in the context of its inner power struggle with the Fatah to launch that war in order to send a message to the Palestinians and to the region that Hamas is not willing to take any kind of like an external circumstances that will impose the trajectory of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And therefore, Hamas is insisting to be the one that is basically dictating the trajectory. In that sense, you can say that to a larger extent, Hamas basically was able to do it as of now, because that brings me to the third element that we have to obviously explore very closely, and that is the question, what is going to be Israel's response? Are we going to witness an Israeli massive move that will topple down Hamas rule in Gaza Strip, or are we going to see some other measurements? And one last thing in that context, in the regional perspective. By this war, waging this war on Israel, Hamas actually formally positioned itself within the Iranian camp together with the Hezbollah. I'm saying that because there have been an inner discussion and debates within Hamas regarding their trajectory. There has been camp that basically said that Hamas should not continue and cling to the military option as it always used to be. There was the other camp that was more military and much more tuned to the Iranian message. The answer for this inner Hamas power struggle was given this morning. Hamas positioned itself clearly on the Iranian camp. And that will be another interesting phenomenon or development to follow, because we have to remember that the Iranian regime, as part of its hegemonic perspective and plan, is basically envisioning a creation of what we call the ring of fire, surrounding Israel's neck from three major arenas: Lebanon, Syria, and Gaza Strip. This morning, one of the three arenas was activated. The question is, are we going to witness the activating of the two other arenas in the region? This is for now an open question. We have to follow that very closely and to see what will be the development. This is a pivotal moment.
A very volatile situation. We're following all of it this morning here on Sky News. We'll be bringing you the developments as and when we get them. Just a reminder, the Palestinian group Hamas has launched the biggest attack on Israel in recent memory this morning. We'll be bringing you more analysis on that, as 22 Israelis have died.